All right, get ready because we are going deep on this one, diving into Authum Investment and Infrastructure Limited's Q3 FY25 results.
Yeah, their financials for this past quarter.
You want to know what's going on behind the scenes? And we've got the info directly from their statements and reports, even board meeting minutes?
That's right. We're going to cut through all the clutter and give you the insights you need to understand what's happening with Authum.
Exactly, no jargon, just the good stuff. So let's start with the big picture. How did Authum actually perform this quarter?
Well, overall, pretty darn impressive. Their revenue from operations hit 617.66 crore rupees,
Standalone? Sterling?
and then 616.94 crore rupees consolidated.
Okay.
Total comprehensive income was a hefty 573.14 crore rupees standalone and 567.37 crore rupees consolidated.
Whoa, those are some serious numbers. What do you think are the main drivers behind these results?
Acquisitions. Remember Authum's acquisition of Reliance Commercial Finance Limited's lending business?
Right, the RCFL deal. How did that impact their financials?
Big time. It's really interesting to see how Authum is leveraging these assets. One key outcome is that they're carrying over losses from RCFL, which has created a pretty significant amount of deferred tax assets, estimated at around 412 crore rupees.
Okay. For those of us who aren't financial experts, what does that even mean? What's the significance of these deferred tax assets?
Basically, it's like a credit that they can use to reduce their future tax bills. Imagine prepaying your taxes and getting a discount later.
Oh, I like the sound of that.
Right. For a company like Authum that's growing like crazy, this frees up more cash for investments and, even more expansion.
So it's a strategic move that sets them up for future growth.
Exactly. But wait, there's more. Authum also made a deal with NITCO Limited, assigning rights to financial instruments and security interests related to NITCO's debts.
Can you break that down for me? What exactly does that kind of deal look like?
Sure. So essentially, they gain control over certain financial aspects of NITCO's debt. You can think of it kind of like acquiring a portion of a loan, including the rights to collect payments and any collateral that backs it up.
So what happened?
Well, this resulted in a gain of 60 crore rupees for Authum. They're really good at finding and capitalizing on these financial opportunities.
For sure. They're on a roll. But this is where things take a turn. Authum is taking a bite out of the snack industry.
Yep, you heard that right. They signed an agreement to acquire a 42.31% stake in Pratap Snacks Limited, or PSL, for a cool 764.54 crore rupees.
Wow, that's a huge move into a whole new sector. What's the strategy there?
Well, it shows that they're thinking outside the box, looking beyond those traditional financial plays and into a broader market. India's consumer market, specifically for packaged snacks, is booming.
I mean, who doesn't love snacks?
Right. So this acquisition could be a really smart move to tap into that growth.
Yeah, acquiring a piece of a rapidly growing market, not just another company.
Exactly. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the other players in the snack industry now.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. But we can't forget about the changes to Authum's board, right?
Oh, you're right. Two new independent directors joined the board, Ajay Kumar and Santosh Nair.
Yeah.
And Purvi Sanghavi was appointed as the new internal auditor.
Now, these roles might sound a little boring to someone outside the business world, but they're super important, aren't they?
You bet. Independent directors are there to provide an unbiased perspective and make sure decisions benefit everyone, not just company management. It's all about good corporate governance.
And the internal auditor, what do they do?
They're like the company's financial watchdog. They make sure everything is transparent, accurate, and compliant. Especially important as a company grows and makes big moves, like Authum.
Gotcha. Like guardians of financial integrity. Speaking of big moves, what about this board meeting where everything was finalized? Anything interesting happened?
Well, it took place on January 15th, and it was done in just over an hour. Straight to business.
Wow, that's efficient. So we've got great financial performance, strategic acquisitions in both lending and snacks, and a revamped board. Authum is making a splash. What stands out to you most about their approach?
Well, their willingness to diversify and try new things is really impressive. The snack acquisition in particular shows a real shift in strategy. It'll be interesting to see how they use this to grow even more.
They're not playing it safe at all. How does this fit into the big picture of the Indian financial landscape, though?
That is a great question.
We're going to have to explore that in part 2 of our deep dive.
Stay tuned because this is where things get interesting.
See you there. We just saw how Authum is really shaking things up with these big moves. But let's zoom out for a sec. How do these actions fit into the current landscape of the Indian financial sector?
Well, it's important to remember that Authum's not operating in a vacuum. We're actually seeing a larger trend in the Indian financial sector, a wave of consolidation and diversification.
So companies are looking for growth opportunities beyond their usual areas of expertise.
Yeah, exactly. And Authum is definitely riding that wave with their expansion into lending and now, surprisingly, snacks.
Right. So the RCFL deal gave them a strong position in the lending market. And now the PSL acquisition is pushing them into the consumer goods sector.
Right. They're strategically placing themselves in key sectors of the Indian economy.
It seems like they're not just growing, but really mapping out their presence across these different markets. Could this disrupt the existing players in these industries?
That's the big question, isn't it? Authum's expansion could definitely change the game. Think about the impact on other snack companies.
Hmm.
Authum brings a lot of financial firepower to the table, which means they can invest heavily in marketing, introduce new products, and maybe even acquire smaller competitors.
So a ripple effect that could completely change the competitive landscape?
Absolutely. And it's not just snacks either. Their move into lending is just as significant. The demand for credit in India, especially from small businesses and individuals, is increasing.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Authum is in a great position to capitalize on that growing demand with their expanded lending portfolio from that RCFL acquisition.
That makes sense. So they're really thinking long term here.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And they're not just sticking to traditional lending either. They're exploring innovative financial products and services.
So not just following the trends, but actually setting new ones.
Exactly.
This brings us back to those boardroom changes we talked about earlier, the new independent directors and the internal auditor. It seems like Authum is really serious about corporate governance. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a really smart move, especially with their aggressive growth strategy. Strong governance is essential as a company expands. Bringing in experienced professionals with diverse backgrounds ensures transparency and accountability.
So it's not just about growth, it's also about building trust with investors and stakeholders.
Exactly. It shows the market that Authum is committed to responsible and sustainable growth. They're playing the long game and doing it by the book.
So Awesom's story is more than just numbers. It's about strategic vision, taking risks, and building a solid foundation for future growth.
That's a great way to put it. But we're not done yet. The story's still being written. What do you think about where this is all going? What are the long-term impacts of Authum's actions, not just for the company, but for the broader market and even our listeners?
That's what we'll be exploring in the final part of our deep dive.
Stay with us because this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, so we've seen how well Authum has been doing and their bold strategy. But let's look ahead. What about the long-term impact of all of this? What could this mean for India's financial landscape? And what about for our listeners?
Well, it's kind of like watching someone playing chess.
Yeah.
You know, a master Authum is making moves now that could have big ripple effects later on. One thing we might see is more competition in lending and consumer goods.
So with Authum entering these markets, other companies will have to up their game to stay competitive.
Exactly. We might even see a surge in innovation as companies try to offer better products and services. Maybe even price wars as they fight for customers.
So that's probably good for consumers, right? More choices and potentially better value.
It could be. But it's not just about individual consumers. Think about the benefits for small businesses. Access to money is often a big problem for them. Authum's increased lending power, thanks to the RCFL acquisition, could mean more options for those businesses that want to grow.
So a boost for entrepreneurship and jobs. That's exciting. But with all this rapid growth, there have to be some challenges. What potential hurdles do you see for Authum?
Well, growth definitely comes with challenges. One risk is that they could overextend themselves. They need to manage their resources carefully and make sure they aren't growing too fast. Another thing is integrating their acquisitions. Bringing different companies together, especially ones operating in such different sectors, takes careful planning.
And this is where their focus on corporate governance becomes crucial, right?
Absolutely. Transparency and accountability are more important than ever. Investors and stakeholders will be watching to see how Authum handles these challenges.
It sounds like Authum is a really interesting example of strategic growth and market disruption. What stands out to you the most about their approach?
I think it's their willingness to adapt and try new things. They're not afraid to step outside their comfort zone, like with that snack industry acquisition. That kind of flexibility is so important in today's market.
So it's been quite a deep dive into the world of Authum. We've seen impressive financials, bold moves, and a real commitment to responsible growth. What's your final takeaway for our listeners?
I'd say keep your eye on Authum. They're a company that's willing to shake things up. Their actions could have a big impact on India's financial landscape, maybe even beyond.
And if you're interested in learning more, we encourage you to do your own research. What about Authum's business intrigues you? What questions do you still have? Let us know, and maybe we'll come back to this in a future episode. For now, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring.